In our headlines on this Monday, August 11th, here in South Korea, President Jae-myung plays host to his Vietnamese counterpart Do Lam, who is here on a 4-day state visit since arriving this past Sunday to address broader, productive partnership. Meanwhile, North Korea denounces an upcoming annual defense drill between Seoul and Washington in a statement carried on its state-run media on this Monday, amid news that it has begun dismantling loudspeakers directed toward South Korea. And the command of U.S. Forces Korea highlights the importance of defense as skill over defense as size when asked to define the term alliance modernization amid concerns of a possible reduction in the number of U.S. soldiers stationed here in South Korea. We start with the summit between President Jae-myung and his Vietnamese counterpart Do Lam earlier on this Monday morning. That was followed by a joint press conference at noon. Arirang's Yoon Jung-min files this report from the top office.
The summit began on a friendly note with a handshake and a gun salute to welcome Vietnam's top political leader.
대한민국 새 정부 들어서서 첫 번째 국빈 방문이십니다. 그만큼 우리가 베트남을 중히 여기고 있다는 점을.
The sentiment was mirrored by Vietnam's Communist Party leader To Lam as he invited President Yi and the First Lady to Vietnam in the near future.
I'm honored to be invited. I congratulate President Lee Jae-myung for being elected as the 21st President of the Republic of Korea.
Monday's summit talks yielded deliverables to further deepen the South Korea-Vietnam comprehensive strategic partnership.
올해 한-베트남 FTA 발효 10주년을 맞아 우리 양국은 2030년까지 교역 규모 1,500억 불 목표를 달성하기 위한 노력을 더욱 강화해 나가기로 하였습니다.
Last year, bilateral trade reached nearly $87 billion, with Vietnam being South Korea's third largest trading partner. There are other areas of cooperation.
We agreed to focus on developing strategic infrastructure, such as infrastructure related to transportation, energy, digital, and climate change.
South Korea hopes to take part in large-scale infrastructure projects in Vietnam, including its nuclear power plant project and North-South Express Railway project. Focus was also on strengthening cooperation on AI, renewable energy, critical minerals, and copyright, for which an array of MOUs were signed. And the meeting was crucial in more ways than one. The new South Korean leader shared his vision for peace and prosperity on the Korean peninsula, as Lam welcomed the South Korean government's efforts to resume dialogue with North Korea. The Vietnamese leader, for his part, noted the importance of peace and freedom of navigation in the South China Sea. On the diplomatic front, the two leaders agreed upon cooperation on multilateral forums, as South Korea and Vietnam serve as hosting countries of the APEC summit in 2025 and 2027, respectively. Also, exchanges will be expanded at parliamentary and municipal levels. And as a clear reflection of the importance of people-to-people and cultural exchanges, First Lady Kim Hae-kyung hosted the spouse of Vietnam's top leader, Ngo Phong Le, at the National Museum of Korea in Seoul. To Lam's visit to Korea, the first of its kind in 11 years, involves a dinner hosted by the South Korean president with heads of major South Korean businesses, including SK and Hyundai Motor Groups. Seoul's top office says Monday's summit signals the start of East pragmatic diplomacy in earnest. This comes at a time when the global trade environment is becoming increasingly unstable. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
And President Jae-myung has granted special Liberation Day pardons to 2,188 individuals, including Cho Kuk, the former head of the minor rebuilding Korea Party. The decision was made at an extraordinary cabinet meeting held on this Monday afternoon. Now, Cho, who served as Justice Minister and senior presidential aide to former President Moon Jae-in, has been serving a 2-year prison term since last December for academic fraud involving his children and unlawful interference with a government-led corruption inspection. Pardoned with restoration of rights, Cho can run for public office again. The first round of presidential pardons under the new administration will take effect this coming Friday. Also, on the political front, a high-level meeting took place between the government and the ruling party with a new head at the helm to address details of the trade deal between South Korea and the U.S. amid preparations for a bilateral summit this month. Our correspondent Shin Ha-young reports.
South Korea's government and ruling party agreed to provide support to industries and businesses expected to be most affected by the new U.S. tariffs. This comes after the two sides on Sunday reviewed follow measures to the recent trade agreement between South Korea and the United States. During the meeting, Democratic Party leader Chung Cheong-le said the party and government will evaluate the impact of the recent trade deal on the economy and industries and devise response measures.
We will work to ensure the outcome of the trade talks directly benefits the national interest and quickly introduce the necessary bills and policies in the National Assembly to carry out follow-up measures without delay.
The two sides agreed to deliberate on the Lee Jae-myung administration's recent proposal to tighten capital gains tax rules by lowering the threshold for major shareholders, a move that sparked strong backlash from retail investors. Currently, only those holding 5 billion won, roughly $3.6 million or more, in a single listed stock are taxed. Under the new plan, that threshold would be reduced to 1 billion won, or just under $720,000.
We closely consulted and decided to deliberate on the issue while monitoring developments.
Sunday's meeting was the first high-level consultation between government officials and the ruling party since four-term lawmaker Chung was elected party leader. Prime Minister Kim Min-seok congratulated him on his election and emphasized that the party, government, and presidential office need to work as one. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
The Trade Ministry here has urged the U.S. for special consideration with regard to import restrictions such as tariffs on polysilicon and its derivatives, which are crucial in the production of solar cells and semiconductors. The request follows news that the Trump administration is exploring the possibility of imposing tariffs on polysilicon imports into the American market under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, citing national security. The South Korean government and relevant companies here, for their parts, have shared concerns that broad tariffs may disrupt supply chains critical to both nations' economies and hinder South Korean investments in the U.S., potentially affecting operations at Hanwha Q-Cell's Georgia solar cell facility and OCI's Texas plant. While denouncing an upcoming annual defense drill between Seoul and Washington in a statement carried on its state-run media on this Monday, North Korea has also begun dismantling its loudspeakers directed towards South Korea this past weekend. Moon Ji-young has more.
North Korea's defense chief has denounced a planned large-scale joint military exercise between South Korea and the U.S. According to the North state-run Korean Central News Agency on Monday, Defense Minister No Kwang-chol warned that Pyongyang would exercise its self-defense right against any provocation. He delivered the warning a week before Seoul and Washington are set to commence their annual summertime Ulji Freedom Shield exercise scheduled from August 18th to 28th. Defense Minister No asserted that the joint exercise conducted under a simulated nuclear war scenario constitutes a direct military provocation against the North. In response to Pyongyang's denunciation, Seoul's Ministry of National Defense said,
The ROK-U.S. combined exercises are annual, defensive drills conducted to maintain a robust combined defense posture. They have significantly contributed to peace and stability, not only on the Korean Peninsula, but also in the wider region. The defense authorities of both South Korea and the U.S. are closely coordinating the execution of these combined exercises.
North Korea's stern warning comes despite recent signs of a potential de-escalation from the reclusive state. Last Saturday, Pyongyang began dismantling some loudspeakers installed along its border, which were previously used for noise campaigns against South Korea. South Korea's Joint Chief of Staff confirmed that North Korean military activities to remove loudspeakers were detected in parts of the frontline area as of Saturday morning. In response to these developments, Seoul's Ministry of Unification said,
regarding North Korea's dismantling of propaganda loudspeakers along the border, our government assesses positively Pyongyang's swift action in removing its own loudspeakers following our removal of anti-Pyongyang loudspeakers.
The move by the North comes just days after Seoul completed removing border loudspeakers aimed at reducing inter-Korean tensions last Tuesday. 문지영, Arirang News.
The commander of U.S. forces Korea stressed the importance of defense skill over troop size when asked to define the term alliance modernization. Now, remarks to this end were shared with the South Korean press corps at a military base of the U.S. here. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung was there.
Capabilities over size. That is what General Xavier Brunson, the commander of the United States Forces Korea, emphasized when asked to define alliance modernization. This follows concerns in Seoul over a possible reduction of U.S. troops on the Korean peninsula for strategic flexibility. The general did not directly mention any troop reduction, but he did highlight the need for Seoul to acknowledge strategic flexibility as well, citing the example of Patriot batteries that have been temporarily moved to the Middle East, but that are expected to return with upgrades.
And whenever things of strategic flexibility happen, I think that the onus is on this command, read me, to ensure that our allies understand what I'm doing. But there's nothing that says that we can't move to where we need to be in support of my own nation and our own objectives.
The general underlined that the ROK-U.S. alliance is not just dealing with North Korea, which he called the closest alligator to the boat, but also with Russia and China, which both have strong links with Pyongyang.
What's being asked of Korea is to be stronger against DPRK, that we might have the flexibility as we modernize our alliance so that we could go do other things.
Against such a backdrop, the issue of transferring wartime operational control, the OPCON transfer, was brought up as well. General Brunson said rushing things would hurt readiness and that conditions need to be bilaterally agreed upon.
Now, if we choose to take shortcuts, that could endanger the readiness of the force here on the peninsula. So I think that our approach has to be one that is, again, bilaterally managed, bilaterally considered, and bilaterally assessed in order to get to that point.
The allies are slated to go ahead with the annual Ulchi Freedom Shield starting next week. Some outdoor exercises have been adjusted, but the general says he is comfortable with the decision and asks the allies will still exercise fully. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
In other news, the U.S. is reportedly seeking to set up a trilateral summit among the U.S., Ukraine and Russia to end the Kremlin's war. Intentions to this end come amid a planned bilateral meeting between the leaders of the U.S. and Russia in Alaska this coming Friday. Our Lee Sing-jae reports.
U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance said Sunday that Washington is working to arrange talks between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy.
That to change. We're at a point now where we're now trying to figure out, frankly, scheduling and things like that around when these three leaders could sit down and discuss an end to this conflict. Now,
Speaking to Fox News, Vance also noted that a meeting between the leaders of Russia and Ukraine would be more productive after Putin first sits down with U.S. President Donald Trump. The U.S. Vice President added that the Trump administration hopes to secure a negotiated settlement to the war in Ukraine, though he warned that both sides will probably be unhappy with the outcome.
We're going to try to find some negotiated settlement that the Ukrainians and the Russians can live with, where they can live in relative peace, where the killing stops. It's not going to make anybody super happy,
Meanwhile, according to a senior U.S. official and 3 people briefed on internal discussions, the White House is considering inviting Zelenskyy to Alaska, where Trump is scheduled to meet Putin next week. However, the sources said no visit has been finalized and it remains unclear whether Zelenskyy will attend. When asked about the formal invitation, the senior official said that Trump remains open to a trilateral summit, but added that the White House is focusing on planning the bilateral summit requested by Putin. While Kyiv has yet to comment on the matter, European allies of Ukraine have reiterated that any peace talks with Russia must include Ukraine. In a joint statement on Saturday, the leaders of the UK, France, Italy, Germany, Poland, Finland, and the European Commission underscored that position ahead of Friday's Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska. The European leaders also expressed their support for Trump's efforts to end the war in Ukraine, but stressed that only an approach that combines diplomacy, support to Ukraine, and pressure on the Russian Federation to end their illegal war can succeed. Zelenskyy has previously said any agreements reached without Kyiv's involvement would amount to dead decisions. 이승재, Arirang News.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the expansion of military operation in Gaza seeks to end, not prolong, the war against Hamas. Addressing members of the media, the Israeli leader stressed that Israel has no desire to occupy Gaza but wishes to liberate it. He further noted that he ordered the military to accelerate the seizing of Gaza from Hamas control to end the war swiftly. Now, back last week, he reaffirmed the 5 goals of Israeli operation in Gaza, including the disarmament of Hamas, the return of all hostages, the demilitarization of Gaza, Israeli security control over the territory, and the establishment of an alternative civilian government not linked to Hamas or the Palestinian Authority. A former White House official and renowned scholar specializing in Korean affairs believes the first summit between President Lee Jae-myung and his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump may offer the 2 leaders the opportunity to adjust their alliance to allow for a stronger security posture. Our Kim Jong-sil reached out to him.
The tariff deal announced late last month may have dominated headlines, but for veteran Korea watcher Victor Cha, its biggest impact is on the agenda it clears the way for.
Now that this has kind of been at least in a framework agreement stage, that really opens up space for the 2 leaders to talk about all the other things that are important in the alliance. They can get back to talking about the issues that matter on security, on the military, on defense and deterrence.
That, he says, could set the stage for adjustments not just in policy, but in the alliance itself.
I think they will. There will be some changes coming to the alliance. We've already seen them on the economic side, but there could also be some coming on the security side.
Could you give us an example on what changes could come, and if you can just predict?
We know very clearly that President Trump wants Korea to pay more for the stationing of U.S. forces in Korea. On the Korean side, the Lee government, progressive governments in general, have been very focused on trying to return OPCON transition. So that's something that could certainly come up. And President Trump has made no secret of his desire to reduce the U.S. military footprint in Korea and including the number of ground troops that are in Korea. So those are 3 big areas where we could see potential change.
Dr. Cha says any troop drawdown could be part of a broader alliance modernization, pairing fewer ground forces with more air and naval power and stronger South Korean intelligence and surveillance.
If that's all packaged together as part of a dual effort to modernize the alliance, then I think you don't have any problems. Then I don't think you hurt deterrence, you strengthen the alliance.
But he warns that acting without consultation could have the opposite effect.
But if the United States just starts doing this unilaterally, just starts pulling forces unilaterally, without much consultation, that can weaken the alliance and can also create miscalculation or misperception by the North Koreans and the Chinese that the alliance is weakening.
Still, he says a trade deal opens the door for talks on key security issues, and their first meeting could determine whether the allies move toward a stronger, more modern security partnership. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. In the United States, President Donald Trump has announced sweeping measures to clean up Washington, D.C. He has ordered the immediate removal of homeless people from the city and pledged to crack down on violent crime. Trump said on Truth Social on Saturday that homeless individuals will be moved out immediately to facilities far from the Capitol. Trump also said he would unveil on Monday his initiative to address the city's violent crime. The president threatened to take federal control of Washington, D.C. on August 5th, saying that crime in Washington, D.C. is totally out of control. The city's mayor, Muriel Bowser, responded on Sunday that Trump's move is legally questionable and noted that violent crime in the city is down 26% this year, with overall crime down 7%, and that 2024 had the lowest violent crime rate in 3 decades. The mayor said what the city needs instead are more federal prosecutors, judges, and funding for repairs to parks and buildings. The leaders of Australia and New Zealand agreed to strengthen military cooperation in the face of heightened regional tensions, including a Chinese live-fire naval drill earlier this year. New Zealand Prime Minister Christopher Luxon and Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese met on Saturday in New Zealand, where they highlighted the need for improved interoperability between their armed forces. Luxon called Australia New Zealand's only ally and called for a unified ANZAC force, referring to the Australian-New Zealand Army Corps operating across the region. Albanese reaffirmed their shared commitment to regional stability. The summit comes after Chinese naval vessels conducted a live-fire exercise in the Tasman Sea in February without prior notification, an action that disrupted commercial flights and prompted Canberra and Wellington to seek deeper defense alignment. 4 crew members of NASA's Crew-10 mission have safely returned to Earth after a 5-month stay aboard the International Space Station. The SpaceX Crew Dragon Endurance capsule splashed down in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Southern California on Saturday at 11:33 a.m. The returning astronauts include NASA's Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers, Japan's Takuya Onishi, and Russia's Kirill Peskov. Their mission involved conducting over 200 scientific experiments, performing spacewalks, and maintaining the station during their 146 days aboard. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, the 10th International Waterfall Jumping Competition took place in Jajce on Saturday. The contest drew 16 divers from across the globe to leap from the 20-meter-high Pliva waterfall into the deep pool below in a unique traditional event. Competitors executed the lasta, or swallow-style jumps, diving styles in which the arms extend outward and the diver enters the water head first. The competition, supported by local and federal authorities and held annually, continues to grow as a tourism highlight. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
Strong and heavy rain has been falling around the south coast today. A heavy rain advisory has been issued for Jeju Island as well. Rain clouds will gradually spread to southern parts of the Chungcheongdo provinces. Looking at the expected precipitation up to tomorrow, as much as 100 millimeters of rain is expected to fall on the south coast, 20 to 80 millimeters in Gyeongsangnam-do province, 10 to 60 millimeters in Jeollanam-do province and Jeju Island, 5 to 40 millimeters in Jeollabuk-do and southern Gyeongsangbuk-do provinces, and 5 millimeters in other areas. Tomorrow morning, Seoul will start off at 24 degrees Celsius, Daejeon and Gwangju at 22 degrees. Daily highs move up to 33 degrees in Seoul and Chuncheon, Jeju 30 degrees. For the time being, it will rain frequently in the central parts of the country this week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Right, those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. As always, thank you for watching.